What's up, Bills Mafia? I'm Fernando Schmude, that's your leading the charge. Today again with Randy Hardman. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, man, and welcome Bills Mafia to this Bills talk, free agency talk, draft crushes talk. Let's start looking at the future Bills. Probably Randy, welcome. Thank you so much, man, for joining me again today.
No problem, man. Always a pleasure to be on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel, and feel free to interact via the comment sections on YouTube for you that aren't live with us. If you're live with us here, feel free to opine via the chat. We'll be interacting with you all along this show today. Randy, it's Super Bowl weekend just ahead of us, right? And after that, then I believe all the league moves on to draft talk and to free agency talk, right? As Bills fans and covering the Bills, we are already in this mode. But just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts for this Super Bowl? Do you have a favorite in this matchup? What are your thoughts on it and your best guess for the results there?
Oh, I mean, I'm definitely rooting for San Francisco. For sure.
100%.
On top of just like the Chiefs, I think the story of Brock Purdy is pretty cool, to be honest with you, going from last pick in the draft to potential Super Bowl champion in his first 2 years. So it's a cool story. There's a lot of good threads. But yeah, I'm definitely rooting for San Francisco.
Yeah, 100%. I find it difficult for Bills Mafia to be rooting for the Chiefs after all, right? And definitely San Francisco has been knocking on there, right? Yeah, it's been so close to it, and hopefully they can get this Super Bowl ring and keep at least one more outside or outside of Mahomes and those Chiefs reach, right? So that's what I'm rooting for as well. But I'm not overly confident that San Francisco can do it, man. I don't know. I'm really worried about they not being able to do so with Mahomes, Kelsey playing his best at the most important time. We'll see. It looks like in a good balanced game, and we'll see, right? Hopefully Christian McCaffrey can be on fire and all those weapons, and San Francisco can pull this one out, right? And how about those awards from last night? Because obviously it's not the subject, right? Go on.
Yeah, that award show was probably one of the most confusing awards ceremonies I've seen in a long time. Aside from like Stroud and Anderson winning, there was, Coach of the Year going to Stefanski over Dan Campbell. How?
Yeah.
The MVP voting. How? Comeback Player of the Year. What? He just over and over again. Whoever these voters are, and I guess they released the names of who the voters are. They're clueless. They're absolutely clueless. I mean, look, I get that the Bills weren't the best team in the league, but across the board, down the numbers, there's nobody that was more valuable to their team than Josh Allen was. There's nobody who was more valuable overall than Josh Allen was. But again, MVP isn't about the best player. It's about the best player on the best team. So as much as everyone hates it, wins, for lack of a better term, are a quarterback stat, and Josh didn't have enough this year to get the voting. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, man. It's totally crazy, and I feel like sometimes some things like the Pro Bowl and all the changes that we've seen in the Pro Bowl game, right? Because it was nowhere near entertaining with the lack of the players not wanting to get hurt and so on. So they needed to change it to the competition. So some of those stuff reached to a point where you gotta change. And I feel like last night's voting reached those these status, where somebody gotta have something done about it, because it's crazy, man. It's not just us as Bills fans and talking about Josh, because obviously we watch every game more than once most of the time, and every single snap from Josh, and we know how valuable he is for the Bills, and how necessary he was to the Bills to be able to be the number 2 seed. It's not like we are talking about the wild card team that it's they were the number 2 seed, right?
Yeah.
Right behind the Ravens, and it was pretty clear the Ravens had way better all around. They were way better all around Lamar Jackson than the Bills were around Josh Allen. How much Josh had to do to elevate this team to this standard. So, but it's not just about us. Look at the Lions. You just talked about the Dan Campbell. The Lions didn't have anybody competing in anything there. Like they were like, okay, just another season from the Lions. After all those years of being an awful team, they can't even win a single award in this voting. It's crazy to me.
To me, Dan Campbell losing Coach of the Year was probably the second most egregious snub of the night. You could definitely make a case for Josh. I think he was the MVP of the year for this season, but I can understand why some people might feel differently. Damar Hamlin, despite the number of snaps that he actually played, him just being able to step on a field in a professional manner, he should have been comeback player of the year. I don't see how you could see it any differently. Joe Flacco played 6 games for an already playoff contending team. I mean, come on. It's a great story. He came off his parents' couch to lead him to the playoffs. Cool. That's awesome. That's great for Joe Flacco. But I mean, Hamlin was a comeback player of the year. Dan Campbell, the Lions haven't ever been to a title game. They've never gone. They've never even been to an NFC Championship game. And Dan Campbell gets them there as a guy who was basically universally laughed at when he took the job. And then for a team that was universally panned, aside from some people like me who loved their draft last year when they took Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell, and they're getting brushed off and saying, oh, the same old Lions, well, look at what they did this year. How is that not Coach of the Year stuff? Yeah, he made a goof in the game, and it probably cost him. But overall, to me, that's the Coach of the Year. Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, come on.
Yeah, man, I really have no words, and also Shanahan, because look, people don't give props to Purdy because he's a system quarterback, right? And I kind of agree, all right? He's not Josh Allen, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but people want to diminish his feats talking, oh, he's a system quarterback, he has a great run game, he has a great system, he has great playmakers around him. So, and the guy who built this system and runs this system and puts the team in the number 1 seed as well in the other conference. So he's not worth maybe being talked and getting the award as well as the Coach of the Year. So,
if
one thing
kind of
nullifies
in terms of San Francisco and the whole system quarterback thing, if it was all the system, then Trey Lance would be their starting quarterback. If it was all the system, then Jimmy G would have done better there. It's the system is good. No argument there. It's not just a system. Purdy is a good player. Does he have an elite skill set? No. Does he have elite measurables? No. Does he have bad games every now and again? Yes. He had a stretch this year where he had 3 or 4 pretty much subpar games based on his standard of play so far in his career. But is he a good player? Yes. Is he the guy that's kind of driving that offense from the quarterback position? Yes. Is it something that you could just stick in any Joe Schmo and they would operate the same way? No. He makes big throws game in and game out. And to sit there and put it off on the weapons and say, oh, well, look at all the players. Who doesn't do well with good weapons around them? What are we
Yeah.
talking about here? What are we talking about in terms of, on one hand, we're going to say, you got to give Josh weapons. You got to add more weapons for Josh. We're about to talk about that. But then on the other hand, you have people saying, well, you can't give Purdy credit for what he's doing because he's got all these weapons around him. Shut up. Pick a side. If you're gonna have that mentality about it, then don't sit here and cry about giving Josh weapons, which I agree with. You should give Josh as many weapons as he wants. That's fine. But you can't take credit away from somebody else because the team already did that for him. It's stupid.
Yeah, man. And then you have like Christian McCaffrey and Purdy.
I get really frustrated with that whole conversation.
No, it's totally right. You're totally right. I can't agree more, man. And then you have Christian McCaffrey and Purdy kind of nullifying each other in the MVP race, and then neither of them are the MVP because Shanahan is too good of a coach, and then Shanahan isn't the coach of the year because maybe, I don't know, he has too good of players. So make things make sense to me because I really can't make sense of this voting. And man, I really feel like the NFL gotta do something about these awards,
and that's another
because you have some voters that have no clue. And what surprised me even more, Randy, about Josh not getting more respect and more votes to be the MVP of the season, with the drastic difference in his stats, in the way he, how much he was asked from the Bills compared to how much was asked from Lamar for the Ravens. And even worse, people were kind of talking trash about the guy Aaron Schatz, who defended him. He actually was the only one who put an article out there explaining why Josh was his MVP and why he had his All-Pro like he had. And I saw people lashing him and talking trash about his vote, and wanting, because he was a homer and took the only vote out of Lamar Jackson train, as Lamar had an awesome season, and that season, stat-wise, it's comparable to a Tyrod Taylor season, his best season maybe as a Bill. So it's totally crazy how people are so disrespectful to Josh, and they were like, no, he had no business being in the conversation. Come on, what games are you watching? Because that dude was clearly the most clinical player in the league, the guy who scored most touchdowns, gained more yards. He was a one-man offense mainly, and people were out there like, oh, what are people doing voting on Allen?
I think this year really proves that, unless somebody is having a runaway season, okay, it's very much a narrative award. And the narrative the entire year was the Ravens and Lamar, even though the numbers didn't back up him being the MVP. And on the other hand, you had the narrative of, look at all these interceptions that Josh is throwing. Yeah, he threw a bunch of interceptions. You know what he also did? Scored a lot of fucking touchdowns. That's what he did.
Yeah.
He threw for the most he had the most yards total in the entire league. I mean, it's cherry picking stats to make an argument based on your predetermined biases is what it comes down to for a lot of these guys.
Absolutely.
So
you have guys like
it's crazy to me that just like with officiating, where there's no set parameters as to what determines a flag in the heat of the moment. So it's very much subjective. They could see one thing is holding, but then on the very next play, the exact same thing isn't holding, and there's no dead set. That's what it is. It's the same thing with the MVP. There are general parameters. There's a general idea of what people think an MVP is, but there's no set definition of what you account for when you're making that vote. And so that's why you have this situation where you have a guy, and look, no disrespect to Lamar, he had a good season. He was on one of the best teams. They had a great defense. I like Lamar Jackson, but he wasn't the MVP this year. The most valuable player in the league? Absolutely not. It's just it is what it is. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, just because it's kind of silly in one respect, but at the same time, I mean, you have to acknowledge at some point, Josh has got to get the acknowledgement that he deserves from the widespread fan base across the league, instead of these weird narratives where they're picking one thing that he does and focusing on that versus the other 10 things that he does amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange to me, the amount of vitriol that for whatever reason Josh Allen generates. I still don't get it. I think a lot of it is pre-draft stuff that people just will not let go of, and it's weird. Look, I've been wrong a lot about a lot of things. If I can't admit that I'm wrong about something, then I got a problem. And a lot of these people just don't want to admit they're wrong. They don't want to, for lack of a better term, take the L. And it's like, man, drop the pride a little bit, because you lose credibility when you refuse to accept something that's right in front of your face. If you said, hey, Randy, the sky is blue, and I was like, man, you're an idiot. It's gray. It's gray all the time. I look dumb. That's the way the Josh Allen people are. They look dumb. The Nick Wrights of the world, who refuse to give the guy credit, he loses credibility. But again, for some people, it's just a shtick. For other people that actually believe it, those are the ones that are stupid. Those are the dummies that you have to ignore. I don't care about a guy like Nick Wright, because I know it's an act.
Mm-hmm.
Take him off camera and talk to him one-on-one, and he might actually have an intelligent take. Yeah, Acho, a little bit, I think, but I don't know.
He didn't have Josh in the top.
He strikes me as one of those thinks he's more
crazy for me. And he actually admitted that he says things to draw attention. So it's crazy how the NFL still gives a platform for those people to actually impact the voting, their official voting. So I feel like they must do something about that, because it's reaching a point where it has you can even take it into consideration, and players have some stuff on their contracts based on those awards, on those Pro Bowl votes, and it means nothing nowadays. Even Josh, I saw a video with Josh meeting, I think it was Taylor Lewan, right? And Lewan was like apologizing to him for him not winning the award, and Josh kind of, I didn't win, like acting like surprised, but poking fun at the league and at the award and the ceremony, and he can't even take it seriously. Nobody can, right?
Yeah, and he knows, and that's why he wasn't. That's why he kind of snubbed them as far as being in the audience. Everybody, the other guys are sitting there, knowing that they're not going to get their name called. And Josh was like, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm going to go have fun with my buddies and go do this trivia bowl thing or whatever it was. I mean, good for him for being a good sport about it, but for also kind of thumbing his nose at the league and their BS awards, and Pro Bowl and stuff like that. Oh, you want to be a third alternate for the Pro Bowl? He's like, no, I'm going to go play in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. I'm going to go play some golf. Screw you guys.
Yeah, totally right. I feel like he's totally right, and I hope he take it to the heart and works even harder with his teammates to get the ultimate respect that's holding the Lombardi Trophy, and then nobody will be able to take anything out of them, despite believing that a lot of people will still talk trash and still refuse to acknowledge their greatness. So I feel like it's inevitable at this point. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel, help us to keep growing, interact with the chat. Renan has an interesting take here, Randy, about I couldn't understand why Josh wasn't in the conversation for Offensive Player of the Year, because exactly, if you were not going to make him the MVP, man, who else produced more offensively than Josh Allen? You could at least, kind of give him a consolation prize as Offensive Player of the Year, but he wasn't even nominated there. So, yeah, we can't make it make sense. Sorry, Renan. Sorry, everybody else, but really makes no sense as Renan states here. Let's move on to our main goal here, our main subject for this leading the charge of today's, because we could stay talking badly about this kind of stuff all day long. But let's move on to draft talk and free agency talk. I want to start with free agents, okay, Randy? Because obviously I feel like Bean is gonna. We have some holes right now, right? It's obvious, but by draft time, we've seen Bean working, and he makes everything. He does everything possible to to fill those holes before draft time arrives, and at least with some decent veterans or experienced veterans, at least, even if they don't have a huge potential to be for example, a great number two wide receiver or a starting defensive tackle. He will sign somebody to have the bodies, to have the experience there, to have a floor on those positions of need. That's what I believe. And whose guys do you see as fits for what the Bills can pay for them and for what the Bills need in those positions of need, especially wide receiver, safety, and defensive line?
Well, I mean, let's kind of go over them one by one here. So if you're looking at right now, before any tags or anything are applied or extensions that are done, you've got some guys on the top end of the spectrum here for wide receivers. So Mike Evans, OBJ, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley. They're maybe not OBJ, but right now his salary is in the top end of what people are going to be looking at. So those are going to be all the 10, 12, 15, 17 plus $1 million a year guys. So you can pretty much count them out as far as the Bills are concerned. So you got stuff about Mike Evans, forget about it. OBJ, forget about it. Who did we mention? T. Higgins, forget about it. Calvin Ridley, forget about it.
I love him.
Those are the guys you're probably not going to see anywhere close to Buffalo. Of course. You like the player, you don't like the price tag. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So who could be a less expensive target for Buffalo in the free agency market? Now we're talking about somebody who's going to come in as the probably wide receiver 2 to 4, maybe 5. Okay, depending on the rookie that they pick, because they're going to take a rookie somewhere. Okay, so if you're running the spectrum of that type of receiver, you've got Curtis Samuel, you've got Kendrick Bourne, DJ Chark, Paris Campbell, maybe a Nelson Aguilar, Hollywood Brown, Michael Pittman Jr. And maybe on a lower end like Laviska Shenault. And we'll stop there as far as free agency options.
Okay.
Which of those names just lights your hair on fire?
Yeah, man, I will tell one thing. I'd like to see Hollywood Brown playing with Josh Allen. Obviously, it's hard to believe in 2024 that Hollywood Brown is gonna set the world on fire, right? But I feel like just like Ted Ginn Jr.
Do you want him as your number 2?
Yeah, it would be a difficult bet, right? It would be really difficult.
So if you look at it that way, where does that lead us in terms of wide receiver? That leads us to the draft more than free agency. So it looks like, to me, it looks like free agency is probably going to be where you supplement your wide receiver room and not where you build it from, right?
Yeah.
So what could they build in free agency? So let's go over to, let's say, defensive tackle and take a look at who's the upcoming free agents in the defensive tackle market. Well, we know Daquan Jones is obviously there. He's an extension candidate for us. We know Tim Settle, I believe, is going to be there. If you want to bring him back on a small deal or what have you, that's That's 50-50 for me. If you want to bring him back on a 1-year deal, that's all right. He's a good depth rotational player, but he's not anything special by any means. So who's at the top of the defensive tackle market? And when you think about that, how old are they? So
Yes.
you've got Chris Jones and DJ Reader, who are both pushing 30. Okay. Then you've got, let's see, it looks like Grover Stewart, 30. Fletcher Cox, 33. Sheldon Rankins, 30. Austin Johnson, 30. Daquan Jones, 32. Tim Settle, 26 and a half. So he'll be 27 by the time the season starts, basically. And then you got guys down there at the bottom, or not in the bottom, but you got other guys down there a little bit further who aren't at the top of the pay scale yet. You've got Christian Wilkins. That would be an interesting ad, bringing Christian Wilkins to Buffalo. Maybe those gropes will be a little bit more friendly now. Javon Kinlaw, a South Carolina guy from San Francisco. Injuries, but very high draft pick. Kind of unfulfilled potential there. Could be worth a flyer. Really depends on his market. Really depends on his market and what the valuation is. But, he's a guy that you could bring in. Taven Bryan, another guy, not a superstar, but a solid player to bring in as part of a rotation. He could be a good little, addition next to Ed Oliver. Hassan Ridgeway, Sebastian Joseph, guys like that. So those are the type of guys that I would anticipate seeing be brought in or considered. Guys in that range, maybe a little bit lower. But as far as name guys that you might recognize, that's kind of where my mind is. Those are the guys you could bring those guys in. All those guys that I mentioned are in the 28, 29 range. So you could give them the 2-3 year deal like Daquan Jones got, and they'd be out of here by the time they're like 33. Which is basically the same age that Daquan Jones is getting out of here at. So you get them from like 29 to 32, 33, and then you move on to the next one, rotate it in. They're gonna draft one probably on day 1 or day 2 anyway. So I think with that combined in the draft, that kind of covers your defensive tackle. Really draft another one later, plus pick up another cheap 1 or 2 in free agency, like super cheap, like vet minimum deals. But in terms of name guys that you recognize, that's kind of where I'd be looking for possible targets for Bean. If you want to move to safety, because that's really our 3 positions that we're looking at, right? I think the big names that people are thinking about is Jeremy Chin is the big one from Carolina, and Kyle Duggar from New England. And I got to get the numbers here just so I can see where they're at as far as their contracts go. But I know there are some guys over at Cover One that really like Jeremy Chin. I like Jeremy Chin a lot.
Me as well. But
yeah, I mean, and he's a guy that you might be able to get Jeremy Chin on the Jordan Poyer deal. Yeah, I mean, you can Jeremy Chin to me is not in the exact same situation as Jordan Poyer because Poyer was coming off a much different injury than Chin is, but Chin's had multiple years of like missing a couple games and is not being utilized probably in the way that he wants to be utilized. And I think that he's one of those guys that could use a change of scenery and that we might be the perfect scenery for him.
Still young,
you've
right?
Got like Darnell Savage coming off of his rookie contract in Green Bay. Whitehead in New York for the Jets. He he got Josh a couple times week 1 last year, so maybe they bring him in. I'm of the opinion that safeties in this defense, and I know that there's a lot of change going on, but I feel like safeties in this defense, we don't have to necessarily go for the high end money and talent wise because this staff and this head coach specifically does a good job with getting them in the right positions. And I know Jerry Butler just left. So the secondary is in flux as far as the coaching goes, but I still have faith in this head coach in that respect. So look for him to add, again, draft and free agency, one or two, three players in there to rotate through. You still got, what was it, Cam Lewis back there as a reserve that I think he's on an RFA deal or something like that. So they could bring him back on a cheap one, probably.
Even
And
Rep
you still got
is an
Tamar
option,
Hamlin.
right? To
We'll see
be
if he's on
brought
the
back.
team next year or not. Yeah, Taylor Rapp's an option. I wasn't particularly blown away by him, so
Me neither.
we'll see what happens there. I think, like we discussed last time with the Lofton exercise, I think safety is a position where, needs improvement or you can do better across the board because it looks like Hyde won't be back and Poyer clearly not the same guy that he was 2-3 years ago. So I think you need to upgrade there in both spots.
Yeah, man, and thinking cost benefit, right? With obviously I have the Spotrac numbers here and what they are supposed to get. I don't know. Some of the values are a little bit low in my opinion, but um, what would be the best case scenario for you if you were in Bean's shoes and taking into consideration the cap and what the Bills will have to work with? Where would you expand more, or where would you maybe not spend that much? And maybe with the names, in your opinion, with the guys you like in this free agency, who would be the guys who you would sign for those positions so you could go to the draft with an open mind and not needing to draft by need?
I don't think there's anybody wide receiver wise that I would be willing to pay to get that off of the need board for the draft wise. So I'd be looking at defensive tackle and safety first and foremost in free agency to kind of fill the gaps. Now, based on how they structure it, based on how many levers he pulls for extensions and that type of thing, will dictate how much cap space we have. Um, there is one player that I feel if he were to actually hit the market and not get franchised, not get tagged, not get an extension before free agency starts, there's one guy that if Bean could free up the money for, this would be the guy that I would spend on, and it kind of contradicts what I just said because I didn't realize he was going to be on the market potentially, and that's Antoine Winfield Jr. I think if you pony up for him, that's gonna take that secondary into a whole nother level, based on who they have already, and then fill that other safety spot you'd be able to fill in the draft. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. would be an amazing ad, and if Bean pulled that off, SpotTrack has him projected as a value of 18.4 average annual salary. It's a big number, that's a big number. But if they can structure it, it'd be a really awesome ad.
Absolutely, man. I would be fine bringing in. Obviously, they gotta be in cheap deals, or at least deals that the Bills can afford. Jeremy Sheen, absolutely at safety. I believe he can play better than he's done for the Panthers, and he's still young. I would also like to add Kyle Duggar if possible. Right, he's in the division and he's been awesome playing for the Patriots. I really believe he would be an awesome addition at safety, but obviously not. It wouldn't be possible to add all of them, but maybe one of them would be already great. And the defensive tackle position, I really
Duggar's
believe.
like 15.5. Sorry, Duggar's projection is 16.5 per year, so he's less than Winfield.
Yeah,
Slightly.
yeah, it's likely. It's still difficult to pull out, right? But Chin, I believe that's a good name. Even Whitehead, who's played good for the Jets and already in the division, a guy who can do a little bit of it all, right? So those are some names that could help, in my opinion. And then a defensive tackle, I really believe Daquan Jones will be back. I don't know if anybody's throwing a lot of money at him. I don't believe so. And at the end of the day, I think he will feel like he's more valuable for the Bills than he can be for any other team. I feel like his injury will help the Bills to keep him, right? And that's a good addition because you can go to the draft to draft a guy with potential to develop to be in the rotation, but you already have your top two set, your floor set with Daquan and Oliver back. And at wide receiver, as I told you before, I believe Hollywood Brown, if for cheap, not spending a lot on him, offers you a deep threat, a guy who can come in and treat the defenses downfield and who knows, maybe he can surprise and be your number two. I don't believe so, but I feel like he can be valuable for the Bills and offer that speed that we've lacked recently. Curtis Samuel is another name that people has talked about because of his connection to Joe Brady, right? And that's another guy who has a lot of speed to threaten defenses downfield. And those two names, I believe, are two names that you can get for not maybe for cheap, but for affordable deals and that can make you go to the draft without the absolute need of a top-notch wide receiver. You know, you can be a little bit more patient, knowing that you have some guys that have experience in top roles for the previous teams.
Yeah, but here's the thing. What I think about in terms of a wide receiver too, and adding somebody to this team specifically, if I bring somebody in to be a wide receiver too, I want to be very, very confident that they can win on their own. Because the way that this year played out, Diggs is going to draw doubles, and right behind him, Kincaid is going to draw doubles. So whoever that wide, and you saw it with Shakir late in the year, he was able to win, his assignments, and that's why he was getting the ball because he was getting open. Gabe Davis wasn't. Gabe Davis,
Yeah,
for lack of a better term, even if he was open, it maybe wasn't going his way anyway. But we need a guy that can win on his own. And so I look at the wide receivers that are available in free agency, and if they fit in that wide or two spot, and on paper, sure, they could. Some of those guys could be a wide receiver too. Hollywood Brown could be a two, and could be a high level too. But can Hollywood Brown win on his own? More snaps than not. I don't know. I don't know about that. This back half of the season, I saw a stat yesterday that we saw a lot of man coverage. The back half of the season, and it makes me think that I want a guy that maybe can be a little bit more physical and win that way. Doesn't mean you have to be slow. I'm not saying that, but I kind of want my wide receiver 2 to be my wide receiver 1 waiting in the wings. And that's why I want to go to the draft to be that guy. Now, if he takes a year to develop, that's okay. If we sign a guy like a Hollywood Brown for a 1-year Band-Aid, much in the same way that we did Emmanuel Sanders, that's okay. But as long as there's a solid plan there and not just kind of throwing darts at a board and hoping to hit a bullseye, it needs to be targeted. It needs to be thought out and planned. And so that's why I'm more in favor of drafting for that top end need, but supplementing with the free agency.
got it. Yeah, I totally understand, and I wouldn't also make a huge investment in Hollywood Brown. I mean, like really bringing a guy to be a bridge guy in a backup plan in case the draft board doesn't fall the way you expect, or at least from what I've been doing recently in mock drafts, it always feels like the Bills will need a trade up because I don't know, the guys that are available on the 28th pick, you always feel like, oh, I will trade down them to wait a little bit more, because there are some equivalent guys, in my opinion, in this spot, and the Bills must need to trade up for a guy they like, or even spend or even reach a little bit on other people's eyes. Even if they think that way, if you have the guy you like, you can do that, right? As long as he can pan out and produce, I'm fine with that as well. So let's move to draft them because that seems the best bet. So where the Bills can add impactful players for next season, and if they can really develop well along the year, the first year in the league, they might be able to reach playoff time already as kind of difference makers and helping the Bills to reach their next goals, right? So looking at the draft, who are your crushes so far, Randy?
So from wide receiver point, basically, I mean, everybody knows my guy Xavier Leggett. He came in at Senior Bowl, had a bad first day, probably hampered by a little bit of an injury. Came back day 2 and really showed people what he's about. And then wide receiver or day 3 came out and pretty much shut it down. Had that nagging injury kind of put an end to his week. But I think coming up here at the combine, it's going to be important that he's healthy to show everybody that power and explosion and speed that he has. I think he's going to blow up the combine. And at that 28 to 40 range, I think is where his spot is, somewhere in that range, 26 to 40. I don't think that we can wait on him to be available in round 2 at our spot at 60. So if he is a target that we want to go after, we're going to either just bite the bullet at 28 and take him and, understand that maybe you overdrafted a guy by a few spots, or you try and trade back and hope nobody has the same idea. But other than him, I think Pearson, Florida, McConkey from Georgia are both good, like day 2 options. I know Troy Franklin's getting a lot of love from some of the people in the content creator community. I don't see it the same way. I think he's a guy that faces a lot of off coverage and needs to add some weight to be able to win at the NFL level. So I think he's a little bit more of a development project than maybe people might think he is. Other guys, Keon Coleman, not a big fan of. He's not a natural separator. I think he can win physically, but I don't. To me, he seems like he's more Gabe Davis than anything else. So he's more of a day 2, high day 3 guy to me. The top of the charts, Odunze, Neighbors, and Harrison Jr., all combinations of side speed, vertical ability, explosion. Even though Neighbors is listed only at 6 foot, he plays big. Brian Thomas Jr. is another one, 6'4". Size, speed, good explosion, burst, vertical threat downfield. These are the guys that we're looking at. If we can't get those guys, if we can't get a Leggett, I think you're looking at more of the Pearsall type players. So it'll be interesting to see where it all shakes out. Everybody has different criteria looking for. I know he doesn't have to be 6'3", 6'4", anything like that. 6'1", 6'2" is fine.
Yeah, man. Watching Neighbors, he
I want speed and a build that can
so much
can get through.
Who does? Neighbors. Watching him play, man. I know he's smaller a little bit, but his style reminds Sammy Watkins coming out. Explosive, making plays everywhere, and really impressed by his tape, and would be awesome to trade up for him. But I don't know if Bean is going that route, especially if something happens. I'm still afraid that Gabe Davis will be back, Randy. I feel like Gabe Davis wants to see the money on free agency, and then the Bills will be able to bring him back for cheap for a 1-year deal. I don't know, just to prove it. I hope I'm wrong, but if they do that, they will set the floor, and with a guy that's already the wide receiver 2, and they will be able to wait a little bit in the draft in their eyes. Despite I'm disagreeing with this kind of way of building. But a guy that you didn't mention and I really really like is Adonai Mitchell from Texas, right? And that's a 21-year-old. I feel like he has the potential to become a number one down the stretch. He has the size. He can separate. He can, for a 21-year-old, I feel like he's a pretty good route runner. He has great hands. So I really like that kid. He's in a guy who's gonna play inside. He's in a guy who's offering a lot after catch, but I feel like as an outside wide receiver, your number two to begin his career with the Bills, he can offer. He's not the most explosive and the fastest wide receiver in the draft as well, but he can threat defenses downfield. He has the size, he has the hands. So I'd love to have
Who's that?
Adonai Mitchell as a
Missed
Bill
it.
and to Adonai Mitchell from Texas. I'd love to have him as
Oh, okay. Okay.
a project being developed behind Diggs, learning from him and becoming your wide receiver too. I feel like he has the frame to put on some weight still and to be a willing blocker as well as your wide receiver too. We know that that's important in that role. Sorry, and so that's a guy I really like, and that's a guy that I might overdraft maybe at the 28. I feel about him just like you feel about Leggett. If you like him, you gotta draft him at 28 because otherwise you are risking losing this guy a little bit later in the start of the second round, right?
Yeah, I think Mitchell is in the Zay Jones territory where he might get drafted a little bit high, and it might take him, deep into his first contract or possibly at the into his second contract before the light really comes on. I like him. I think he's got potential, but I think there's a learning curve there that might change perceptions on him, after he gets drafted.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah, it's a fair assessment. And about Coleman, man, his tape, his some of his catches are crazy, right? And you see the frame and the size, and you kind of, and even from Florida State, so it's kind of the guy, not Bean because Bean wasn't the general manager, but he was part of the team. The guy that the Panthers drafted in Kelvin Benjamin back in the day, right? Big size target who can go up and grab it and doesn't really care about separating. Is always trying to win those contested catches. I feel like Coleman could offer that for the Bills as well, and we know being brought Benjamin in as uh, the first potential number one for Josh Allen. It didn't work out for several reasons, but for a change, I feel like it would be nice to have this kind of guy available for Allen because we've had only speedsters and smaller kind of guys, and maybe for a change it would be nice to have because let's be honest, Gabe has some size, but he doesn't have the ability to win contested catches all the time. In fact, most of the Josh Allen interceptions are through in direction of Gabe Davis, and I always talk about it how Gabe kind of refuses to battle for some of those balls, So maybe Coleman would be nice in this sense, but you already said that you're not the biggest fan of that guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know if what he does in college is going to translate well enough to the pros to make that high of an investment. You know, um, I think Gabe Davis being more of a finesse big receiver kind of lends itself to what you were talking about. Where yeah, he's got size, but he doesn't really use it. Coleman's not
Mhm.
afraid to use his size. I wonder if his almost basketballish mentality about using his body um, is going to be a hindrance as a pro because he doesn't have that physical ability to really separate when he needs to. And I know his time speed, based on what I'm looking at, says 4.45, and that's fast. But I
Mhm.
don't I don't see 4.45 when I've seen clips of Coleman.
Yeah. Got it. And how about defensive tackle position, man? The defensive tackle position uh, is also a position of need, as we talked in the free agency part of the show. And who are the prospects that you might see being able to help the Bills out in year one already?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple names out there that are hot on people's minds, and that's the kid Fisk from Florida State that had a big week at the Senior Bowl. Sweat, another one, had a big week at the Senior Bowl. It'll be interesting to see where things progress because they both have limitations on them that I don't know if either one of them is like a full 3-down defensive tackle. I think there might be some things there. Chop Robinson's getting some love for people as a possible edge idea. It just really depends. Excuse me. Yeah, this really depends on where they see that value for the position. I know that Bean values building in the defensive line trenches, so I'm pretty confident that defensive tackle or, God forbid, defensive end edge is going to be a premium selection, one of the top 3 rounds. But I think if you're looking at guys for the Bills, you look at Murphy, Sweat, Newton from Illinois, maybe. And then Lauren, what's his name? The guy from Miami, what's his name? Phillips? Is that his name? Or Williams? Williams from Miami.
Oh,
he's another one too. So So I mean, there are some options out there.
Yeah, man.
There are some options out there.
I really like Murphy, but I don't believe he will. I think the Bills will need to draft him in the first if they want him, right? So, and then Sweat. I've been looking at those big guys.
I mean, the great thing is that there's only so many spots in the first round.
Yeah, that's true. But I still feel like Murphy maybe isn't even there at 28. I think he's that good. Now Sweat. I've been looking at big guys and some maybe guys that can play alongside Ed Oliver long term, instead of more like rotating with him. And Sweat fits the bill. Even a guy that I've been looking at some tape, and he's in maybe what the Bills use. We haven't seen the Bills drafting or going after those huge nose tackles, right? But with the way the Bills defense has played small, it might be nice to have one of those in the middle to play early downs. And McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M is this kind of nose tackle, big guy over 320 pounds, and that guy that always is drawing double teams and occupying blockers and maybe freeing up other people to play. So I like this style of player. Not sure if the Bills gonna in that direction, but I'd like to see him, and that's a guy you can have later, maybe in round 3. So this is an interesting name. And another one is from LSU. Yeah.
Yeah. But something else to keep in mind is that we just lost our defensive line coach, and we have a new defensive coordinator coming in. So it's very much one of those situations where maybe what we've done in the past isn't what we're looking at for the future. So the guys that we're thinking about all fit in the McDermott Bills from 2017 to 2023 range. And maybe we need to look outside of the box to somebody else, because like you said, we haven't had like that giant nose tackle. Maybe that's
I have a hard time
that they're going to bring in.
I have a hard time believing McDermott is really allow a big change to happen, but we'll see. He's been evolving. He's been changing. He changed his late game calls as a defensive.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just. Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just saying maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
True. And another guy is Mason Smith from LSU. This guy, he can do it all physically, all right. And that's another guy who, obviously, we are early in the process, but a guy who can be taken in the second, the third round, and might be able to develop as a nice partner for Ed Oliver for a long time. Physically, he has it all. He gotta be developed, but just like you said, new defensive line coach, new coaches taking over on D. Maybe they can try to put their hands on this guy and make extract the best out of him as a physical specimen as he is. And at safety, Randy, can we? Do you see the Bills maybe investing in the first round? Now we have former Kitchen's defensive coach is the Bills defensive backs coach now, right? So the connection is already there. That's a guy who should be available at the end of the first round, and a good name, a name I really like. How do you see this safety class and the Bills fits?
Well, I totally understand the idea that we just brought in Miami's secondary coach to be our secondary coach. So Kamari Kitchens is going to be an easy connection to make. I really don't think we need to make safety a top priority in the draft based on this coaching staff and the success they've had of turning, mid to lower thought of players into viable starters or better. So Kamari Kitchens to the Bills first round, easy to make the connection. Would I like it? No. Would I hate it? Pretty much. But if he turns into a great player for us, awesome. But I would rather wait for safety later, as in like day 3 later. We've got 10 picks. Maybe use that second, third rounder on a safety, and then another, fifth and seventh on corner safety hybrid flex players that you can use on special teams and all that. I don't think we need to spend a first on a safety or a second, really. It's just, I know it's a need, but it's just not the way that I want this team to be built.
Got it. Yeah, it makes total sense, and especially if we look at the depth at the cornerback position for now, at least, because obviously we don't know yet about Davis White and how soon he'll be able to get back on the field, and if the Bills will still retain him. There are a lot of question marks about Trey's future, but we have Trey, we have Rasul Douglas, we have Benford, we have Elan, we have a lot of uh, cornerbacks there, and do you see the Bills maybe trying to move any of them, or to make any of them a possibility at safety? Benford has been mentioned so many times, but he's won the cornerback 2 job every year he's been there. So it's difficult to move a guy who's won there to safety maybe. So how do we evaluate this possibility to minimize the need at safety?
I don't think Benford moves. I don't think Benford moves. I think Trey White at safety is a long shot. Um, so it's really going to be built from free agency and the draft. My opinion. I don't really see a whole lot on the roster right now to fill those voids other than Cam Lewis, DeMar Hamlin. They'll probably stick around. But I think your Dane Jackson's probably gone. I don't think he converts. They'll probably do something with Trey White. They might end up getting rid of him just because of the number. I know they don't want to, but based on the injuries and the salary and everything, it might be something that they do.
Makes sense.
But yeah, that's pretty much the way I see it.
Yeah, and some people has talked Elan, but man, it makes no sense for me to move Elan to safety where some of the reasons he hasn't played so much gets even more important about the communication, the comfort level playing zones, the tackling ability. I don't I don't see how Elan would fit as a safety. And I really believe the best shot for Elan is with the new DB's coach, maybe working a little bit with techniques that makes him more comfortable instead of moving him to safety.
Yeah,
Uh,
Elam moving to safety, I think, is a non-starter right now. I don't think that's something that you want to do.
yeah. So Renan has some opinions here. He agrees with you about Coleman's game. He's at least he thinks it's not sustainable. That's a question mark that you just showed us here, and he has some names here. Uh, Randy, Troy Franklin, man, Troy Franklin. I really believe he has the speed, but that 170 weight, 170 pounds, it scares me. I feel like he's young as Adonai Mitchell. He's a guy that offers some of the things that Adonai Mitchell's offered, like being young, being able to be developed. But I don't know. From what I saw from Franklin, his hands also looked for me a little bit suspect, and I'm sick of drops, so that what puts me a little bit away of Franklin at the wide receiver group,
Yeah.
and he has also Macmillan there in Corley. The other guys, what could you tell us about? We talked a lot about Sweat, but then Nubbin, the Utah guy, I believe, right? And Fisk, you already talked about him.
Yeah, Fisk had a good week at the Senior Bowl. I'm trying to get my mouse down here so I can see that comment. Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Fisk had a good week at the Senior Bowl, but I believe, if I remember right, his arms came up a little bit short, which was a concern. But high motor guy. He's gonna get all the stereotypical white guy comps as far as ones that people like. So the same things that they said about Harrison Phillips as far as being a high character and blue collar and lunch pail guy and high
New
motor and
Kyle
all that.
Williams.
Yeah, he's gonna get all those. He's gonna get all those coded things where people just want to say, oh, we like him. He's a white guy. He's gonna get all those things, and not that they're not deserved. He's a good player, but there are a couple questions. But he could be a guy, day 2, second round. I could see it, no problem. As far as Malachi Corley, he's been getting a lot of love coming out of the Senior Bowl. He'll probably be one of those high day 3 or day 2, maybe day 2, but more than likely like a high day 3 guy that's going to come in and have a lot of fanfare. And we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll translate. It's hard because the Senior Bowl is a good display for some things, but also it can be kind of fool's gold in other ways. And so you got to go back and look at what he did in college, and then it's Western Kentucky, so there's a little bit of a competition level question. And I'm not denying that the player is, what he's put out there has been good. What he's put on film has been good, and what he did in the Senior Bowl was very good. But there's level questions that I have about guys like that. So again, if I'm looking at Malachi Corley, I'm hoping that he slips into into day 3, mid day 3, bottom of the 4th round, top of the 5th, and then snag him. That's
kind
what
of
I
like
look at.
Shakir.
Kind of like Shakir, yeah. Kind of like Shakir, where you're wondering, like, man, why is he falling?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Senior Bowl, man, I was fooled by Zay Jones in the Senior Bowl. I will never forget that.
Yeah. But again, that was a guy where he set all these records and he looks the part. He's got the size, he's got speed, he's got these great catches all on tape. But there was just a little bit of competition level adjustment that he had to make, and learning how to play the pros game and not the second tier college level game. And now he's a decent NFL wide receiver. Would you trade up in the second again to draft Zay Jones? Nope.
No, I'd trade Gabe Davis for Zay Jones. Absolutely.
So I mean that's what I tend to think about. Like when you're looking at wide receivers, like all these guys, their highlight tapes look great, and they go to the Senior Bowl and they do great things, and they go to the combine and they're going to run well. At the end of the day, what does it look like on the field in the game, and adjust it to the new competition level. You're not playing against the 17th or 18th percent best players in the country anymore. You're playing the top 1% every week, all day. And can you raise your game to that level? For some guys, yes. For many, many, many of them, most of them, no. So
100%.
that's where I'm at with this the second, third, or the third, fourth tier wide receiver guys that are the people say, oh, they're climbing boards. I mean, maybe, but not really. The top tier guys are set.
100%. I agree. Randy, thank you so much, man, for taking your time joining us again today, talking some draft, some free agency. I really appreciate you taking your time, and hopefully you're back again soon, sooner or later, rather than later. It will be always a pleasure to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely appreciate it.
Bills Mafia, thank you so much. Hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings. The show will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. Feel free to download, play there. And I really appreciate you taking your time joining us today. People who interact in the chat, thank you so much. It was a blast to interact with you. And if you're watching in another moment, let us know about your opinions, the guys you agree, disagree, your crushes. It will be a pleasure to interact with in the YouTube section, also the comment section. So I'll be back on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, to talk some Bills in Portuguese with a lot of interaction in the chat. And next week with the show in English on Friday again. Thank you so much for joining us, and go Bills.
Go Bills.